As anyone who knows me probably knows, I've been playing way too much Super Mario Sunshine Bingo lately. So I thought, a lot of people that I'm friends with kind of don't know what it's all about. So I thought, I'd make this little video, talk a little bit about what bingo is, talk a little bit about the different formats of bingo, and even talk about some bingo meta, bingo theory, what makes a goal good, spicy things like that. So yeah, I hope this is interesting. Definitely not experienced with this kind of content, but let's see if we can make it work. And I hope this is enjoyable. When I tell my friends about Super Mario Sunshine Bingo, the first things they think about are things like this and like this. And I just like bingo, SMS bingo, I feel like is so much more than that. So the way it works is a card is generated with 25 goals, just like, any other bingo card would have numbers on it. But instead of numbers, this card contains different goals in Super Mario Sunshine that you need to complete, and once you complete that goal, you can click it. Much like in regular bingo, the early days of speed bingo also featured the clearing of certain lines. Sometimes you'd spice it up and you do 2 lines or 3 lines. I even know there's a Pokemon variant, Cinco Bingo, where you do 5 lines. And these different formats are definitely very fun. But what makes Super Mario Sunshine Bingo, at least in its current form, unique, or at least in its most competitive form, unique, is that the format, instead of just creating lines, is based on whoever gets the 13 goals first. This format's called Lockout, and the way it works is that once you click a goal, the opponent can't click that goal. So a lot of, that little variable that seems, really simple adds a ton of depth and interactivity because it's a lot about prediction and reading and routing around what you know about your opponent, and all those different variables make that variant a lot more competitive, at least in my mind, and I know that the community agrees. Speaking of the community, the SMS Bingo community is so dedicated to the game that we run a league every season. It's like about every half year or so. And as I'm recording this video, Season 3 is pretty much coming to a close. Playoffs are going to start next week. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm doing pretty well. I'm kind of feeling myself. I had a 8-1 season, I think, which is pretty sick. Almost doubled my ELO points. Not gonna lie, felt pretty good. If you want to catch some of that hot and spicy bingo action, I'm gonna have a link in the description, both to the SMS Bingo Discord, where you can hang out with everyone. There's a pingable roll whenever there's a match that goes live. Bunch of different features, utility, and also I'm gonna link the 2 streams. Most of the stuff gets streamed on Sunshine Community, but Bingothon also hosts a couple matches a week, and they'll both be linked in the description, like I said. And we have 20 matches a week-ish, so there's a ton of bingo content out there. You could just come in any given afternoon that isn't, I think, Monday or Tuesday. There's probably going to be a match that either just happened or is going on. So definitely worth checking out. It's super sick to watch. But yeah, with this little spiel aside, I'm going to get into the kind of brunt of the video. I'm going to be talking about the 4 main formats of SMS Bingo and kind of what skills they test. And yeah, let's get right into the sauce. The Lockout format seems to have one of the most simple concepts, but in my mind, I think it's actually one of the more complex formats and really tests a player's routing ability and just general bingo skill to see who's going to win it. So one thing that I think is really cool about Lockout that isn't necessarily true for almost any of the other formats is that you have a lot of freedom with what you want to do, where there's often a bunch of different ways to tackle a card. And even if you go for ways like big early game commitments or things like that, as long as your opponent doesn't do the same wacky play you're doing, you can hide it from them, which is pretty cool. But I do think Lockout, the best way to play it in my mind is to set yourself up in a way so that you can adapt to whatever your opponent does. Because at the end of the day, your opponent can click a goal at any time. Well, of course, that has a limit to it. No one's gonna have 26 shines in the first 20 seconds. But a lot of the time, you'd never know what your opponent's gonna do unless you're really, really familiar with their game style. So if you set yourself up for a versatile position, where you can react to the information your opponent gives you and either pivot to something else or out-commit them to a goal. For example, let's say you lose the first blue coin totals goal, but you were close, then you can put yourself in a position where you can win the next blue coin totals goal. This is something that I really enjoy about Lockout because I feel of all 4 main bingo formats, this is the one that best tests your ability to adapt. And I think that's just one of the most cool mid-game skills to witness, especially in really close matches when seeing those play out, and making the right call in the right moment is something that's always a sight to see. The way row control works is to win, you need to control 3 rows. How do you control a row? Get 3 out of the 5 clicks in that row. At the end of the day, that means all you need to win is 9 clicks. And with that, restriction, it opens a whole door to completely different routing possibilities dependent on the card. A lot of the time in Lockout, you're kind of forced to adhere to these kind of general routing ideas where it's like, okay, well, even if I do some slow things, I should be able to contest things that are not slow. Or, even if I'm focusing a lot on blues, at least I'll be able to contest things that have a lot of shines. In row control, sometimes you can win a match just by doing blue coins, and that's it. And that is insane. Row control is a menacing format. And the fact that you can come up with these crazy unorthodox routes and just win the game that way make it super duper volatile. A lot of the time, the games hinge on one crucial call, and if that call goes one way or the other, that means the game is just over. A lot of the time, there's just no coming back. That volatility makes row control a super sort of routing focused format where if you can find the best path, and especially if you can have a backup plan following that path, you can feel pretty confident that you're going to win the game. In my opinion, and I'm going to be honest, I'm heavily influenced by PK, aka Pneumatic Komodo, aka Piss King, because that man kind of gave me a row control lesson in 2 weeks ago. So, a lot of what I'm going to say is probably influenced by him. But the best way, in my opinion, to win at row control is to focus mainly on 4 rows. Because, again, focusing on 3 rows, if one goal gets taken that I want, I'm going to be crying. But at the same time, if I spread myself across 5 rows, most of the time, that's just spreading yourself too thin, and it's a recipe for failure. Because a lot of the time, I just won't have enough footholds in those 5 rows, and then if my opponent is just focusing really hard on their win condition, they'll just be able to execute, no biggie. On top of this, knowing what goals are important at what point in time is a really difficult skill, but that's kind of the crux to row control, where you gotta assess what your opponent knows, what your opponent is doing, and combining those informations to basically figure out what is important right now. Invasion is definitely one of the hardest formats for new players to understand. So I'm going to do my best to explain it, but I will also link a video by Papacino in the description, who does a much better job than I will at explaining Invasion, but I will go over the basics. The first legal click has to be in the outside of the board, like on the outer rim, and once a click is made there, it determines a player's base. So the rules of Invasion are, you can only traverse the board think of it like chess, right? There's a limited amount of mobility that you have, and you can only traverse the board via certain rules. So the first rule is you can always click anything in your base. So let's say, hypothetically, your base is the first row, right? Row 1. If that is your base, you can click as many things as you want in your base. Then the second rule is you can only click as many things in the row following as in the row prior. And so what that means is, let's say my base is row 1, and I have 2 clicks in row 1. That means maximum I can only click 2 total things in row 2. Let's say I have 1 click in row 4 when row 1 is my base. That means I can click maximum 1 thing in row 5. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I hate Invasion. Invasion is my least favorite format. It's definitely, a lot of it has to do with that I'm just really bad at it. I'm definitely not good at it. I am definitely have trouble knowing what goals to prioritize when and making really creative plays to come back from situations in which I'm not favored. But the main real reason that I hate it, at least in my mind, I don't know how biased I am, but I'd like to think it's not that biased, is that there are some cards, and this is pretty rare. This doesn't happen often, but there are cards in which one base is just so much better than the other base that there's really no counterplay. And again, right, this is exceedingly rare for the most part in Bingo. Like, it's not going to happen very often, but the fact that it can happen at all, that these cards are generated where whoever wins the first goal rush will win the game, is in my opinion bad design and kind of speaks to a huge flaw in the format. But I know a lot of other people disagree, and a lot of people really, really enjoy Invasion, especially on good cards, because, you know, honestly, there's some of the most hyped matches to watch. However, to be good at Invasion, aside from speed, there are a ton of other important things. One of which being understanding which clicks are important and which ones aren't. And importance in this way is actually very different, because not only can a goal count as a goal for you and as a path for you to move across the board, it can also hinder your opponent's movements and prevent them from clicking a more important goal in even a following row. And using these tricks to limit your opponent's options is, in my opinion, the key to Invasion and how to win the format. But being able to identify which goals are important, which goals are contested, and which goals are necessary to secure at a point in time is obviously far easier said than done. Draft Lockout is my personal favorite Bingo format. And the way it works is it functions exactly the same as regular Lockout, except at the start of the game, both players do a snake draft, which is like the first person picks 1, and then the second person picks 2, and the first person picks 2, etc. until both have 5. And they each snake draft 5 goals, and those goals are safe for the first 30 minutes, which means that your opponent can't take those goals. And even though that is pretty simple, usually you're not going to be able to get your entire draft. That's like true for the vast majority of cards. And as a result, it's definitely possible to do a lot and play around a lot with a draft. Being good at draft, I think one thing that people overlook a lot when it comes to draft lockout is how draft really favors players that can like make a good initial route as opposed to sort of mid-game calls, just because a lot of like routes can be guaranteed and you don't have to worry about a speed differential or goals getting sniped from you, and then you won't have to play around that. Another thing that draft tests very nicely is a knowledge of the specific draft meta, which I think is personally very exciting. If you want to know more about this draft meta, I'm going to link a video by Jeff Compass in the description, who's going to talk a little bit about draft. But the key ideas behind good drafts are you want to pick goals that are low commitment, that don't share a lot of specific information, and that are definitely achievable within the 30-minute time period. But yeah, I think draft is really fun. I like the idea of being able to sort of play this pseudo-information game with clicks even before the match. And also, you don't have to worry about routing a card on the fly during the cutscenes. And as a result, draft is a personal favorite format of mine, but I know there's definitely people who don't see it that way, and you know, that's totally cool. You do you, and have your own opinions. As for the question as to what makes for a good goal or a valuable goal, now we get into some real spicy stuff. I know there's definitely going to probably be some disagreement with how I analyze this, because I think everyone has their own way of valuing different goals, but I'm going to just kind of talk about the 5 main qualities that I use to see whether I think a goal is good or bad. And, you know, feel free to disagree, bingo heads. I'm going to run this by PK anyways before I fucking publish this shit, so that's going to be sick. But, my 5 reasons are as follows. So the first reason is very simple. It's time sink. How much time is it going to take me to get this goal? So when it comes to a time sink, think of it like, maybe 26 shines shouldn't be my first click because that'll take me 40 minutes. Or something like, maybe I shouldn't rush for Pianta Shadow Mario because that just takes a really long time. Or, maybe I shouldn't go for Wiggler at the start of the game. Small things like this, just, they take a lot of time to go for. And, of course, this isn't a general rule. Sometimes you're going to want to go deep Pianta at the start of the game. And sometimes you're going to want to go deep Gelato at the start of the game. But that is going to be because of other reasons, not because it takes a long time. Things taking a long time, generally a bad thing. So that's one thing to keep in mind, in my mind. That also is a factor that makes things like bosses so slow. Or not slow, I suppose, but if you are doing bosses, like 3 bosses before Pinna, odds are you won't win Pinna. Things like that. So really recognizing how much time things cost is very important. The second thing that I'd point out is direct synergies, and this is something that I think people, even beginners at Bingo, are pretty good at seeing. Like, if you see goals such as 6 Rico Shines and Rico Hidden Shine, and then combine that even with, say, enemy blue coins, which is generally a Rico goal because Rico has 4 enemies through episode 4, those are pretty good direct synergies, and those make those goals kind of act as a cluster. And if you do 6 Rico Shines for 1 goal, that's kind of garbage. But if you do it for like 3 or 4 goals and then progress to 2 other ones, then, all of a sudden, Rico looking kind of spicy. But direct synergies aside, I do want to talk about something else, and this is something that I feel new players really overlook a lot. And that's indirect synergies. Now, what's an indirect synergy? Well, let's say I say 8 Delfino Shines and 12 Noki Blues. Well, you might say, well, what the hell do those have to do with each other? 8 Delfino Shines is in Delfino, and 12 Noki Blues is in Noki, and one is Blues and one is Shines. The reason those are indirectly synergistic, damn, that's a spicy word, is because Delfinos are very fast. So even if Delfinos are a big time sink, you're going to get a lot of value out of that goal in terms of Shine progression. And if you do 8 Delfinos before Noki, odds are you're probably going to win to Noki. Now, of course, that isn't always the case. Don't do Gelato 2 and Serena 1 and 7 other slow shines and then still expect to win to Noki, because, it might not happen. But as a general rule, things like that will link together. Another thing could be something like Boss Rematch and 5 from 2, where it's like, those are technically 2 very different things, but a boss rematch will always get you good deep level progression that you would use for something like 2 turbos or for 5 from 2. And looking at some indirect synergies like that, where where goals aren't directly associated, is I think a big step to kind of witnessing like the true like skill ceiling of Bingo. A fourth thing that only matters for certain formats is goal positioning. I'd say, arguably, this matters most for Invasion, but it's also really, really important for row control. I know PK will probably disagree with me on that one. But, like, cutting off your opponent in places that they need clicks, it can literally win you those games. Like, simple single clicks can do that. And then if you snipe someone in Lockout, it's like, okay, well, I just do a different goal. That happens. And they can still win the game. So things like that are really, really interesting. And then finally, I'm going to also say the value of a goal to your opponent is another thing that makes a goal a lot more valuable. So let's say, for example, that my opponent, let's say that 7 bluebirds is on the card. And 6 bluebirds are very easy to get, everyone will get them, but the 7th bluebird is very difficult, because there are 8 bluebirds total, and the 7th bluebird will have to come from either Bianco 6 or Pianta 8. So that's a big stinker, right? Those are very deep commitments, you're not always going to want to go there. But let's say your opponent has revealed to you that they've done, let's say, Bianco Shadow Mario. Well, that means, they have access to 7 birds. That means this goal is probably in their game plan. If you can take that goal at that point, it's going to be a lot more brutal and take a lot of value away from a play that your opponent would be making. Those are 5 little qualities that I look at when I think about how important goals are, but I know that this is definitely subjective, and I bet top players have many different criteria for rating these goals. I just wanted to give a little bit of insight on how you can kind of systematically look at how important a goal is, value different things against each other, and, you know, make a good end decision. I've been super addicted to bingo lately, so I wanted to share it with everyone, you know? I think it would be really cool to see a lot of my friends, you know, just get more into bingo. Or at least, you know, come by and watch my matches. I know, kind of whack, no one's coming through, you know, that's all I'm saying. But, you know, it's just something I've really been enjoying, and I really wanted to share it with people. I hope this video is interesting. I hope it was informative, especially for people who don't know a lot about bingo. And, you know, I hope this was good. You know, thank you for watching, and peace.